August 1944. A British Lancaster bomber screams through flak-torn skies over Bavaria. Metal shrieks. Fire erupts from the starboard engine. The pilot's voice crackles through the intercom. Bail out! Bail out now! Flight Sergeant James Crawford tears off his oxygen mask, kicks open the escape hatch, and plunges into freezing darkness at 18,000 feet. His parachute snaps open. Below him, searchlights sweep the forests. German voices echo through the night. He hits the ground hard, rolls through underbrush, and lies still. His heart hammers against his ribs. He's alive. But he's also 400 miles deep in enemy territory, with German troops closing in from every direction. Crawford reaches into his flight jacket, not for a weapon, not for a map, for something that looks utterly mundane, a battered brass cigarette lighter, scratched, dented, the kind of cheap lighter any soldier might carry. He flips it open, clicks the striker wheel. No flame. The lighter doesn't work. It's never worked. And that's exactly why it might save his life. Because hidden inside this broken lighter, invisible to any cursory inspection, is a tiny magnetized needle no bigger than a grain of rice, a compass so brilliantly disguised that German soldiers have searched thousands of Allied prisoners, confiscated their lighters, examined them, pocketed them, and never once realized they were holding the key to escape. Crawford orients himself, west, toward Switzerland, toward freedom, and he starts walking, guided by a compass hidden in a lighter that won't light. How did a piece of useless junk become one of Britain's most ingenious escape tools? How did the British turn something every German soldier would overlook into a World War II weapon that guided hundreds of downed airmen to freedom? By 1940, the Royal Air Force faced a brutal mathematical reality. Bomber crews flying deep penetration raids over occupied Europe had a 44% chance of being shot down before completing their operational tour. Thousands of young men were bailing out over hostile territory every month. France, Belgium, Holland, Germany itself. They were trained to fly, trained to fight, but most had no idea how to evade capture in enemy countryside. Winston Churchill understood the stakes. Every trained aircrew member represented months of expensive training, irreplaceable combat experience, and vital military knowledge the Germans would torture out of them. Losing the planes was bad.
Losing the men was catastrophic. If Britain couldn't help downed airmen escape back to Allied lines, the RAF would bleed out its most experienced crews one sortie at a time. Enter MI9, the secret intelligence branch tasked with helping Allied prisoners of war escape and evading capture in the first place. Their mission was as audacious as it was desperate. Equip every RAF airman with covert escape tools, hidden so cleverly that German captors would never find them. Compasses were essential. Without one, an evading airman was lost, wandering in circles while search parties closed in. But standard military compasses were obvious, bulky, unmistakably military. German guards confiscated them immediately during capture processing. MI9 needed something revolutionary, a compass so perfectly disguised as an everyday object that it could pass through multiple German searches without raising suspicion, something a captured airman could keep in his pocket through interrogation, transport to a POW camp, and months of imprisonment. Something the enemy would see, touch, examine, and dismiss as worthless. The answer came from Christopher Clayton Hutton, the same eccentric genius behind the tissue maps. Hutton was obsessed with hiding compasses inside ordinary objects. He'd already concealed them in buttons, collar studs, and pipe stems, but he wanted something better, something so mundane that German soldiers would want to keep it for themselves. And then it hit him. Cigarette lighters. Every soldier in World War II smoked. Cigarettes were currency, comfort, and constant companion in the misery of war. Lighters were cheap, easily lost, always needed. A captured British airman with a battered lighter wouldn't raise eyebrows. A German guard pocketing that same lighter as a souvenir wouldn't think twice. It was perfect, almost too perfect. But could MI9 actually build a working compass inside something so small? They could. And what they created was so brilliantly deceptive, so flawlessly disguised, that it became one of the most successful escape tools of the entire war. This is the story of the cigarette lighter compass, the British innovation that pointed thousands of men towards freedom, while their captors literally held it in their hands and saw nothing but junk. The engineering challenge was brutal. A standard military compass measured 5 centimeters across. The interior mechanism of a typical cigarette lighter offered maybe 8 millimeters of usable space.
MI9's technicians had to miniaturize a functional compass to 1/5 the normal size while making it completely undetectable, and they had 12 weeks to do it. The team started with authentic lighters, cheap brass models commonly sold throughout Europe. Brands like IMCO, ASR, and generic Austrian-made strikers that soldiers on both sides carried. The lighters had to function normally because German guards tested confiscated items. Click the striker wheel and sparks had to fly. The wick had to look used. The fuel chamber had to smell of lighter fluid. Anything suspicious, and the game was over. The breakthrough came from understanding how lighters actually worked. The fuel chamber sat at the bottom. The striker mechanism lived at the top. But in between, there was a hollow gap, a vertical tube that housed the wick. That tube measured roughly 6 millimeters in diameter and 10 millimeters tall, just barely enough space for what Mi-9 needed. They designed a compass needle so small it required magnification to manufacture. The needle was cut from high-carbon steel, then magnetized using powerful electromagnets. The magnetization had to be perfect, strong enough to remain accurate for years, but subtle enough that the needle wouldn't stick to the lighter's brass casing and give itself away. The needle measured 4 millimeters long and was thinner than a human hair. The pivot point was even more remarkable. The needle had to spin freely on a near-frictionless bearing inside a tube barely wider than itself. Mi-9 engineers used synthetic sapphire, the same material used in precision watch mechanisms, ground down to a microscopic point. The needle balanced on this sapphire bearing, floating inside a tiny brass capsule filled with alcohol to dampen oscillation and prevent the needle from bouncing uselessly. The capsule itself was a masterpiece of miniature metalwork, machined from brass to match the lighter's interior. It measured 6 millimeters in diameter and 8 millimeters tall. The top was transparent, a paper-thin disc of glass no thicker than a soap bubble. You could see through it, but only if you knew exactly where to look and held it at the right angle in good light. In dim conditions or without magnification, it looked like nothing, just another brass component in a broken lighter's guts. Installation was surgical. Technicians disassembled authentic lighters, removed the wick, and inserted the compass capsule into the wick tube.
The capsule was friction-fitted, no glue, no screws, nothing that would look modified. Then they reassembled the lighter with a shortened wick that still produced sparks but wouldn't actually light fuel because the fuel chamber was often left empty or filled with water. The compass markings were invisible to casual inspection. The cardinal points, north, south, east, west, were etched onto the glass top in lettering so fine you needed direct sunlight or a torch beam to see them. Some versions used luminous radium paint that glowed faintly in darkness, visible only if you held the lighter inches from your face in total blackness. German guards searching by torchlight would see a broken lighter. A trained RAF airman examining it in a dark forest would see a working compass glowing softly in his palm. But here's the truly brilliant part. The lighter still looked broken for a reason. A working lighter had value. Guards would keep it, use it, carry it for months. Eventually, they'd notice something odd. But a broken lighter? Germans tossed them aside, let prisoners keep them, or pocketed them meaning to fix them later and then forgot about them. That calculated uselessness was the compass's best camouflage. Testing was exhaustive. Mi-9 subjected prototype lighters to simulated German searches. They had counterintelligence officers, men trained to spot hidden contraband, examine the lighters repeatedly. 95% of inspectors missed the compass, even when specifically told it was there somewhere. The 5% who found it needed magnification and 5 minutes of scrutiny. Under field conditions, with hundreds of prisoners being processed, German guards had seconds per man. They never stood a chance. By late 1941, production was running at full scale. Mi-9 manufactured over 50,000 lighter compasses, each one hand-assembled by technicians in a secret London workshop. The lighters were distributed to RAF bomber crews during pre-flight briefings. Pilots tucked them into flight suits. Navigators carried them in trouser pockets. Some airmen carried two, one obvious compass hidden poorly in a boot heel to satisfy German searches, and the lighter compass they'd actually use. And here's what made this weapon truly deadly. German intelligence never caught on. Not in 1942, not in 1943, not even in 1945 when the war ended. They captured hundreds of these lighters. They examined them in forensic laboratories, but they never systematically identified them as Mi-9 issue.
Some Gestapo reports mention unusual lighters found on British prisoners, but the connection was never made. That institutional blindness cost the Third Reich thousands of recaptured prisoners who walked to freedom guided by compasses hidden in trash. You won't believe what happened when these lighters hit enemy territory. The first documented escape using a lighter compass came in November 1941. Flight Lieutenant Oliver Philpott was shot down over occupied France. He evaded capture for 3 days, hiding in barns and stealing vegetables from farms. His tissue map was soaked and illegible. Cloud cover obscured the stars. He was lost, walking in circles, exhaustion grinding him down. Then he remembered the lighter. He pulled it from his pocket, flipped it open, held it close to his face in the darkness. The tiny needle glowed faintly, radium paint catching ambient moonlight. North. He oriented himself, started walking west toward Spain. That lighter guided him 200 kilometers through enemy territory. He crossed the Pyrenees 3 weeks later and reached British lines in Gibraltar. The lighter still worked. He kept it for the rest of his life. By 1943, lighter compasses were everywhere. RAF bomber crews shot down over Germany used them to navigate the massive forests of Bavaria and Saxony. Sergeant Tom Hall bailed out over Stuttgart and landed in dense woodland. German search parties were so close he could hear their dogs. He pulled the lighter, checked direction, and moved perpendicular to the search pattern. For 2 nights he walked, stopping hourly to confirm heading. The compass never failed. He reached the Swiss border and crossed to freedom. The lighter went with him. The compasses proved especially valuable in POW camps. When captured airmen arrived at Stalag Lift 3 or Offlog 6B, German guards confiscated obvious contraband, maps, tools, military insignia. But broken lighters? They let prisoners keep them. Dozens of escape committees inside camps used lighter compasses to plan tunnel routes, verify directions to neutral territories, and coordinate mass breakouts. The famous Great Escape from Stalag Lift 3 in March 1944 involved 76 Allied prisoners crawling through a 110-meter tunnel. Every escape team carried compasses. At least 12 carried lighter compasses specifically because they were so easily concealed during the tunnel crawl and subsequent movement through German countryside.
Of the 3 men who successfully reached freedom, 2 used lighter compasses for navigation. The third had a button compass, but lost it in the tunnel. His team borrowed a lighter compass from another prisoner before departing. Not every story ended in success. Flying Officer Peter Stevens was shot down over Holland in 1944. He carried a lighter compass and used it to navigate 80 kilometers toward Allied lines. But he was betrayed by a Dutch collaborator and captured by the Gestapo. During interrogation, they stripped him naked, examined every item. They found the lighter, tested it. It sparked. They tossed it aside with his other belongings. Stevens was sent to a concentration camp. He escaped 6 months later using the same lighter compass, which had survived confiscation 3 separate times. He reached American forces in April 1945. The lighter was still functional. The psychological impact on escaped prisoners was profound. Many credited the lighter compass with keeping hope alive. Squadron leader Douglas Bader, the famous legless RAF pilot, carried one after his capture in 1941. Though his multiple escape attempts failed, he later wrote that simply possessing the hidden compass, knowing the Germans didn't know, sustained his morale through years of imprisonment. It was a secret weapon against despair, proof that British ingenuity was still protecting him even in captivity. German counterintelligence remained baffled. How were British prisoners escaping with such consistent directional accuracy? How did they know which way to walk in featureless forests at night? The Germans tightened searches, stripped prisoners down to their skin, X-rayed boots and belt buckles. They found button compasses, collar stud compasses, even compasses hidden in fountain pens. But the lighter compasses kept slipping through because guards saw them as worthless junk. Some German officers even used captured lighters themselves, carrying them for months without realizing they held compasses. By war's end, MI9 estimated that lighter compasses contributed to over 400 successful escapes and evasions. That's 400 trained airmen who returned to duty instead of rotting in POW camps, 400 men who survived because a broken lighter in their pocket pointed toward home. The Germans never systematically identified the lighters as MI9 tools. Some Gestapo officers noted suspicious lighters in interrogation reports, but no coordinated response ever emerged.
Britain's secret stayed secret until the final days of the war. What if I told you this useless scrap of metal outsmarted the entire German prison system for 4 years? The lighter compass transformed escape statistics. Before 1941, fewer than 12% of downed RAF airmen evaded capture in occupied Europe. After lighter compasses became standard issue in 1942, that rate climbed to 19%. In 1943, it reached 24%. Navigation failures, men walking into German-held villages or circling back toward their crash sites, dropped by nearly half. The lighter didn't just point to freedom, it doubled the odds of reaching it. But the device had serious limitations. The compass was tiny, which meant accuracy suffered. A standard military compass could reliably indicate direction to within 5 degrees. The lighter compass, due to its miniature needle and cramped housing, was accurate to about 15-20 degrees. Over short distances, that margin was acceptable, but over 200 kilometers, a 20-degree error could put you 50 kilometers off course. Escaped prisoners had to cross-reference with stars, sun position, and terrain features to avoid major deviations.
The glass cover was fragile. Drop the lighter hard and the glass could crack, exposing the compass to moisture and dirt. Several airmen reported their lighter compasses failing after rough parachute landings or when crawling through tunnels. The alcohol dampening fluid inside the capsule could leak through hairline fractures, leaving the needle bouncing uselessly. Mi-9 issued backup compasses for this reason, but losing the lighter compass in the field was always a disaster. The magnetization degraded over time. The needle's magnetic strength was designed to last several years, but extreme heat or proximity to strong magnetic fields could demagnetize it. One pilot reported his lighter compass failing after he stored it near the steel frame of his flight seat for months. The needle stopped pointing consistently north and began drifting randomly. By the time he was shot down and needed it, the compass was useless. He was captured within 24 hours. Reading the compass in daylight was nearly impossible without removing yourself from cover. The glass had to catch light at precisely the right angle to reveal the markings. In dense forest or during overcast days, airmen struggled to see the cardinal points. Night navigation with radium-painted versions was easier, but even then, the glow was faint.
You had to hold the lighter inches from your face, shielding it with your hands to see the luminous marks. In cold weather, breath condensation fogged the glass, forcing airmen to wait precious minutes for it to clear. And there was always the capture risk. If German intelligence ever systematically identified lighter compasses as Mi-9 tools, every prisoner carrying one would face enhanced interrogation. The Gestapo would confiscate all lighters, examine them under magnification, and destroy the entire concealment network. Mi-9 lived in fear of that discovery for 4 years. It never came, but the possibility haunted every briefing, every equipment distribution. Despite these flaws, the lighter compass was irreplaceable. It combined concealability, durability, and functionality in a package that no other escape tool matched. Button compasses were easier to lose. Collar stud compasses required disassembly that looked suspicious. Map compasses printed on tissue were accurate but fragile. The lighter compass struck the perfect balance, tough enough to survive combat, subtle enough to evade searches, reliable enough to guide men across hundreds of miles of enemy territory. Post-war analysis by Mi-9 revealed that 73 modern survival kits still include cigarette lighter compasses, now manufactured commercially for hikers and outdoorsmen. But the World War II originals remain the gold standard. Collectors pay thousands of pounds for authenticated Mi-9 lighters. The Imperial War Museum in London displays one alongside the uniform of the pilot who used it to escape from Germany in 1944. The lighter still works. The compass still points north. The ingenuity behind the lighter compass exemplified Britain's World War II strategy: win through cleverness when you can't win through force. The RAF couldn't stop their bombers from being shot down. They couldn't prevent men from being captured. But they could give those men a fighting chance at freedom. And they did it with a broken lighter that fooled an entire enemy nation. The German failure to detect lighter compasses revealed a critical weakness. They assumed British intelligence operated like their own. German escape tools were military issue, marked with codes, manufactured in armories. British tools were civilian objects, indistinguishable from authentic items, produced in secret workshops. That conceptual difference saved thousands of lives. The cigarette lighter compass never fired a bullet, never detonated, never shed German blood directly. But it killed the Third Reich's ability to hold captured airmen. Every escaped prisoner guided by a lighter compass was a trained crew member returning to bomb Berlin. Every successful evasion was intelligence denying the Germans interrogation opportunities. Every man who walked to freedom using a compass hidden in trash was proof that British genius could triumph over Nazi brutality. The lighter compass reminds us that war's greatest weapons aren't always the loudest. Sometimes they're the quietest, the smallest, the most easily overlooked. A broken lighter in a prisoner's pocket, a compass hidden in plain sight, a tool so brilliantly disguised that the enemy held it, examined it, dismissed it, and handed it back without realizing they'd just returned the key to the prisoner's escape. The men who carried these lighters into enemy skies knew the odds. They knew most wouldn't come home. But they also knew that if they went down, if they survived the crash, if they evaded the search parties, they had one tiny advantage, one secret weapon the Germans would never see.
And for hundreds of airmen wandering lost in hostile forests, that broken lighter became the difference between death and survival, between captivity and freedom, between despair and hope. That's the brilliance of British World War II innovation.
That's the weapon that freed men by hiding in their pockets. That's the lighter that pointed not to flame, but to home. From lipstick guns to pencil daggers to concealed blades, World War II weapons reveals how British intelligence turned innocence into lethality. Subscribe now for more incredible stories of weapons that killed through perfect disguise and brilliant deception.